There's a reason your life feels heavier than it should. And it's not just the pressure from the outside. It's the quiet leaks from within. Every careless word, every unchecked emotion, every impulsive decision, every unguarded thought. This is where your power quietly slips away. Self-control isn't about being rigid. It's about being intentional, precise. And most people never get there, not because they lack potential, but because they were never taught how to hold their energy. They speak when they should stay silent, react when they should pause, spend to impress people who aren't even paying attention, and believe every thought that crosses their mind as if it's truth. But the man who governs himself, he speaks less, he feels deeper, he spends with purpose, he thinks with clarity. And it's not because he was born that way, it's because he trained for it. Start with your words. Most people talk more than they listen. And even when they do listen, they're often just waiting for their turn to speak. Words get spilled to fill silence, ease discomfort, or cover insecurity. But here's the truth. Every time you speak without intention, you lose a little presence. You dilute your influence. And while you might forget what you said, others remember. They remember the oversharing, the apology you didn't need to give, the contradiction you didn't catch. Words are like currency. The more you spend, the less value each one holds. That's why those with real strength speak with purpose. Not because they don't have something to say, but because they understand that saying less makes every word carry more weight. Speaking clearly is not the same as speaking to be liked. One earns respect. The other just adds noise. And noise has consequences. It distorts how others see you. It distorts how you see yourself. It clouds your message, drains your energy, and pulls you away from who you are. When you speak just to be accepted, you start shaping your words not to be truthful, but to be pleasant. You smooth the edges. You soften your stance. You shrink your message for comfort. And over time, you lose not just clarity in your speech, but clarity in your identity. Socrates once said, "The greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be." But there's no honor in performing your words for approval. When your voice becomes a mirror of what others want to hear, it stops belonging to you. We're taught that being liked is the same as being successful. That if we're agreeable, we're safe. That if we're charming, we're accepted. But that mindset carries a cost. You begin to betray yourself in small ways. You agree with things you don't believe. Stay quiet when your soul wants to speak. Smile through things that don't sit right. Then convince yourself you're just keeping the peace. But more often than not, you're avoiding a hard conversation with yourself. Because speaking with clarity requires courage. It means saying what's true, even when it's not popular, even when no one claps for it. And when you lose that clarity, your emotions often follow. A careless word becomes internal stress. A dramatic retelling reignites your anger. A few casual doubts spiral into anxiety. We like to think emotions just show up uninvited. But many are shaped, quietly, by the words we use. We speak in worst-case scenarios. We replay stories where we were the victim. We rehearse fear until it becomes part of our identity. Your words are your emotional compass. If your speech is scattered, your path will be too. Chaos in your mouth creates chaos in your life. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows." And often, what we resist most is silence. So we fill it with commentary, complaints, over-explaining. That noise becomes our emotional default. Insecurities become habits. Doubts get repeated until they turn into personal truths. It's not just that emotion affects what we say. What we say constantly fuels how we feel. Think about the small phrases you repeat. "I'm exhausted." I can't do this. I'm not enough. These aren't throwaway lines. They're reinforcements. Every repetition shapes your nervous system, your mindset, your perception of reality. The mouth becomes the entry point for emotional chaos. The more you speak without awareness, the more you feel without clarity. And when emotions go unchecked, your decisions don't come from wisdom. They come from volatility. Aristotle put it perfectly. Anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not easy. Emotional discipline isn't about suppression. It's about holding space long enough to understand. That's what real strength looks like, and it begins with one powerful shift. Recognizing how your words either steady your mind or stir it into chaos. We're told that speaking up is a sign of strength, and sometimes it is. But not every thought needs a voice. Not every feeling needs a spotlight. The more we speak without purpose, the less weight our words carry. Plato once said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something." That line cuts deeper when you realize how often people speak, not to bring clarity, but to feel seen, not to connect, but to validate themselves. In the effort to be heard, we often bury what actually matters. We drown out the substance by chasing attention. This is where discipline enters. Not the harsh, rigid kind, but the calm, grounded kind. The kind that pauses before it replies. The kind that chooses presence over performance. The kind that trusts silence, especially when silence says more than words ever could. Because the more deliberate your speech becomes, the more emotionally steady you grow. And with emotional steadiness, your decisions sharpen. You stop rushing into conflict. You stop obsessing over conversations that ended days ago. You stop trying to win every exchange. You start moving from clarity, not ego. The Stoics had a phrase, endure and abstain. They weren't suggesting you suppress what you feel. They were pointing to strength, the strength to hold on to what matters and let go of what doesn't. The strength to sit with discomfort without amplifying it. That kind of quiet presence, that's what people notice before you ever speak. That's what gives your words weight when you finally do. Mastering your mood is the beginning of mastering your direction. When your emotions run wild, your path becomes unclear. You're not steering, you're spinning. And the danger? Most people don't realize they've given away their control. They think they're managing things, when in reality, they're avoiding them. Not by facing what's difficult, but by distracting themselves. One scroll, one snack, one excuse at a time. We tell ourselves we need a break. But often, what we're really craving is an escape. Discomfort shows up, and instead of holding space for it, we reach for what's easy. A song, a snack, a screen, a small talk conversation, anything that pulls us away from what's real. Not because we're weak, but because we've been taught that pain is a sign something's wrong. But pain, more often than not, isn't a warning. It's a teacher. We've been sold the illusion that peace means always feeling good. But real peace? It's found by facing what doesn't feel good and remaining steady. That's where resilience is built. That's where you stop running from life and begin leading it. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And he was right. Facing yourself means sitting still long enough to feel the things you've been avoiding. It means breathing through anger instead of exploding with it. It means letting fear exist without letting it take control. It means realizing the sadness doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Still, we run. We mask our emotions with comfort because that feels easier. It's easier to point at the day, the job, the weather, the traffic. It's easier to say, "That's just how I am," as if being moody is part of your DNA. as if losing control is just your personality. But the truth is, it's not. Who you are isn't fixed. It's simply what you've repeated. And what's been repeated can be replaced. Aristotle believed that virtue isn't something we're born with. It's something we grow into. Character, he said, is built through habit, not handed down at birth. So if you've learned how to panic under pressure, you can also learn how to stay calm. If you've learned to lash out, you can learn to pause. If stress makes you collapse now, with enough awareness and repetition, it can teach you how to stand tall. But it doesn't begin with force. It starts with presence. The next time pressure rises, don't run from it. Just notice it. Give it a name. Watch it without judgment. Most of the time, it's not about fixing the feeling. It's about understanding where it's coming from. Even sitting with it, quietly, for a few minutes changes your relationship to it. You don't need to fight it. You just need to stop fleeing from it. That's the beginning of emotional discipline. Not pretending you're fine, and not letting every feeling control you either. Real discipline isn't cold, it's calm. And calm gives you options. The more you practice this, the clearer things become. You stop being ruled by your emotions. And you start moving through life with clarity. And when clarity shows up, your decisions improve. This is where the ripple effect begins. Emotional instability doesn't just affect your mood, it shapes your money. Most financial mistakes don't come from ignorance. They come from emotional chaos. That quick purchase, that late-night order, that upgrade you didn't really want. It wasn't about the thing. It was about the moment. You were tired, restless, uncertain. The purchase became a distraction, a temporary bandage over a deeper discomfort. Most of the time, the problem isn't the spending itself. It's the emotional state behind it. And that's what quietly shapes everything else. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." That includes the part of you that reaches for comfort instead of staying grounded in discomfort. Money decisions made from instability rarely serve you. We don't invest well when we're scared. We don't save when we're emotionally drained. We don't spend wisely when we feel lost. And here's the hard truth. The world knows this. The world depends on your emotional reactivity. Every ad, every notification, every limited time offer. It's not designed to appeal to your wisdom. It's built to poke at your insecurity, your fear, your boredom. And when you're emotionally unsteady, you don't spend from intention, you spend from imbalance. You call it a reward, but it's really a reaction. You call it self-care, but it's actually self-avoidance. You call it treating yourself, when really you're trying to soothe an unseen tension inside. But this cycle doesn't have to continue. You can pause before you purchase. You can breathe before you swipe. You can feel the urge rise and still decide not to follow it. That's not restriction. That's direction. That's power. You don't reclaim control by cutting joy out of your life. You reclaim it by choosing joy that aligns with who you are. Not joy that's born from a moment of emotional imbalance. You begin to tell the difference between spending that supports your future and spending that simply numbs your present. You stop chasing what sparkles. You stop needing things to feel valuable. You stop spending just to be seen. And instead, you begin to move with intention, with clarity, with peace guiding you, not impulse. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But in today's world, it's the unexamined impulse that causes the deepest damage. One small choice, made from the wrong emotional place, can ripple into weeks or months of regret. And the damage isn't just financial, it's mental. It's the reinforcement of a pattern. I feel bad, so I buy. I feel empty, so I consume. I feel restless, so I distract. You don't need to cut yourself off from everything. You just need to get honest. What are your decisions really trying to solve? Are they building your foundation or just filling a hole? Because no item, no matter how perfect, can fix what's going on inside. If you're disconnected from yourself, the product might arrive, but the emptiness remains. The good news? This can change. You can slow down. You can listen more deeply. You can create space between the feeling and the action. And in that space, your power returns. Not because you denied yourself, but because you finally stopped running. Socrates warned of the unexamined life. But in this age, the unexamined impulse might be even more dangerous. Because every impulse left unchecked becomes a habit. Every habit repeated becomes identity. And that identity, left unchallenged, quietly shapes the life you live. This isn't about being rigid. It's about becoming rooted. You don't have to deny yourself the things you want. But you do need to understand why you want them. You need to get honest about what part of you is reaching for your wallet. Are you building your future or buying a brief moment of relief? Are you moving in alignment with your purpose or simply distracting yourself from discomfort? Because here's the truth. The shine fades. The package gets opened. And if your inner world hasn't shifted, you're left with the same ache, just with a little less money. But when the real work begins, the inner work, things change. You don't just spend less. You spend better. You stop reaching for things to complete you. You stop using money as a substitute for meaning. Your spending starts to reflect your values, not your emotions. You begin investing in what helps you grow, not just what makes you feel better for 5 minutes. And you enter rooms already full. So you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. That kind of wholeness, it can't be bought. It's earned. Through discipline, through silence, through presence, through consistent choices made with intention, not impulse. The world won't teach you this. It will sell you the opposite. It rewards reaction. It rewards distraction. It praises emotional spending and calls it self-love. You'll hear phrases like, treat yourself, or you deserve this, or buy now, figure it out later. But dopamine has debt. That quick hit of pleasure often comes with a slow, invisible cost. Not just in your bank account, but in your habits, your focus, your energy. The more you soothe yourself through spending, the more your nervous system begins to rely on consumption for comfort. That's how addiction starts. Not always with substances, but with behaviors we've normalized, because everyone's doing it. We've made reactive spending a cultural ritual. Rough day? Buy something? Feeling overlooked? Spend big? Tired? Unmotivated? Uncertain? Retail therapy. But this kind of therapy is short-term comfort for long-term avoidance. The relief is temporary. The emptiness? That tends to stay. Carl Jung once said, "People don't have ideas, ideas have people." And one of the most powerful ideas people live under today is this: that your worth must be seen to be real. That to be respected, you must own something. That to belong, you must prove it. And that idea owns people. It shapes how they spend, how they compare, how they define themselves. But money, like words, is power. And just like words, most people don't use it to strengthen their lives. They use it to be seen. Not because they truly want the thing, but because they want the feeling, to be respected, to feel in control, to feel valid. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And money is power. So how you handle it reveals who's really in charge, you or your impulses. If you spend to build, money becomes a tool. If you spend to impress, it becomes a mask. Every dollar you spend tells a story, not just about your taste, but about your priorities, your self-awareness, your discipline. Are you buying to build your life or to broadcast an image? One leads to peace, the other to noise dressed up as confidence. Sometimes the broadcast is subtle, a luxury item you couldn't afford, but posted anyway. A dinner you didn't plan for, but wanted the photo. A designer piece, not for joy, but for image. That's not empowerment. That's emotional outsourcing, using purchases to say what you haven't yet learned to express on your own. Eventually, the moment ends. The post gets buried. The applause fades, and you're left with the same emotions, the same insecurities, only now with a receipt. That's the hidden cost of emotional spending. Temporary validation, long-term disconnect. Aristotle spoke of eudaimonia, a life of deep flourishing, not through indulgence, but through purpose, not through excess, but through excellence. He taught that true happiness doesn't come from what we consume, but from how closely we live in alignment with who we truly are. So the real question isn't whether you can afford it. It's whether the purchase reflects the person you're becoming. If it doesn't, if it's just another attempt to fill a space within you that objects can't reach, then no price tag will ever make it feel worth it. Eventually the high fades, the likes slow down, and the deeper ache, the one you were trying to outrun, returns, untouched, unchanged. That's the moment most people spend again. But it can also be the moment you choose differently. The moment you pause, you observe, you interrupt the cycle. Because real financial freedom isn't just about how much you earn. It's about how emotionally stable you are when you decide what to do with it. It's not about having more, it's about needing less. That's where your strength begins. The way you spend reflects the life you're building, or the one you're trying to escape. And often, it's not about impressing people who matter. It's for strangers, or worse, people who aren't even paying attention. We sacrifice peace for approval. We chase validation in a race no one else is watching. And that trade, it always ends in loss. But the shift begins with something small. A pause, a breath, a moment of clarity before the impulse. Because every purchase either plants peace or feeds noise. Choose wisely. Next time the urge to spend rises, pause. Slow down. Notice what emotion is sitting underneath it. Is it boredom, stress, loneliness? Before you react, meet the feeling. Breathe through it. Write it down. Move your body. Make space for presence before you make a purchase. Because sometimes, what you're reaching for isn't a product. It's peace. And peace doesn't come in packages. It comes from self-respect, from self-awareness, from knowing you had the impulse and didn't follow it. That kind of restraint builds something more valuable than satisfaction. It builds trust in yourself. It builds quiet confidence, not the kind that comes from having, but the kind that comes from holding. Socrates once said, "He who is not contented with what he has would not be contented with what he would like to have." If you're not grounded in who you already are, no purchase will ever fill that space. It might give you a quick lift, but it won't build the mindset that sustains real peace. Because even with a full bank account, your life can still feel empty. Financial discipline isn't about denial. It's about direction. It's understanding that your worth isn't found in what you wear, what you drive, or what you post. It's in how aligned your actions are with your values. Real strength reveals itself in the quiet moments, in the small, unseen decisions that no one applauds, but that change everything over time. Every dollar you spend shapes something, your future or your facade. You're either planting seeds for growth or scattering your energy chasing temporary highs. And here's the truth. No amount of shopping will ever make you feel like enough if you haven't already decided that you are. That belief, that grounded, silent knowing of your worth, can't be bought. It must be built. Through awareness, through discipline, through the quiet choice to stop letting the world spend your power for you. Each time you resist a reflex purchase, you reclaim a piece of your energy. Each time you prioritize your values over your urges, you move closer to freedom. And that kind of freedom, it isn't loud, but it's life-changing. Beneath all of it, how you talk, how you feel, how you spend, is how you think. Your mind is the soil everything else grows from. And most people leave it unguarded. They let any thought, fear, or belief take root. No filter, no awareness, no protection, just noise, masquerading as truth. But your mind isn't a dumping ground. It's a control center. If you don't guard what enters, you can't control what leaves. Your words, your decisions, your behaviors, your habits. Most people never realize this. They confuse mental activity with mental authority. But a loud thought isn't always a true thought. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's what happens when your mind goes unexamined. You react to fears that aren't even yours. You follow stories you never chose. You play out patterns shaped by your past, your culture, your pain, without ever stopping to rewrite the script. But silence can change that. Not the kind where you mute the world, the kind where you meet yourself, to sit with your thoughts without obeying them, to watch them come and go, to learn which ones are useful and which ones are noise. That stillness, that awareness, that's the beginning of reclaiming your mind. But stillness isn't easy. It reveals things. It uncovers patterns buried under distraction. It asks you to confront discomfort you used to escape from. But that discomfort, it's the start of clarity. That's where transformation begins. Plato once said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self. And the battlefield is your own mind. Because if you can't sit still without checking your phone, if silence makes you spiral, if peace depends on external validation, then you're not grounded. That's not calm. That's dependence." Freedom begins when you stop reacting to every thought. When you catch a pattern before it runs your day. When you create even a second of space between stimulus and response and choose something better. That space, that pause, is where your power lives. You don't need to believe every thought you think. You don't need to follow every story your mind tells. You can stop, watch, and choose again. Every time you do, you take back control. You step out of chaos and into clarity. That's how mental strength is earned. Not through force, but through attention. Not through noise, but through presence. The more you train your mind, the less control chaos has over you. The more calm you create inside, the less power the world has to shake you from the outside. So how do you begin? By ending the cycle of automatic reaction. By noticing the thought before it becomes action. By pausing when anxiety rises, not to suppress it, but to understand it. You start separating signal from noise. You become the observer, not the puppet. And as you create more space between feeling and reaction, you create more room for choice. That's where your power grows. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But just as urgent is this. The unobserved mind is not worth following. You can set goals, make plans, chase dreams. But if your mind is chaotic, you will sabotage your own path. You'll talk yourself out of opportunity. You'll overthink your progress. You'll retreat from challenge. Not because life is too hard, but because your own thoughts made it feel that way. And here's the truth most avoid. No amount of success on the outside can fix a mind that's at war with itself on the inside. Nothing external can save you from internal disorder. You can have the money, the followers, the achievements. But if your inner world is in chaos, none of it will feel like enough. That's why so many people reach everything they thought they wanted and still wake up with anxiety, dread, or a quiet ache they can't explain. Peace isn't a reward for success. It's the foundation of it. Aristotle called this eudaimonia, a life of deep fulfillment rooted in discipline, virtue, and reason. But that kind of life can't begin when your thoughts are scattered, when your mind is loud, reactive, or afraid. Because in the absence of awareness, the loudest voice wins. And most of the time, that voice is fear. Fear traps us, not just in the moment, but in the memories we hold on to, the thoughts we replay over and over. We carry failure like proof. We rewrite conversations to soothe our shame. We imagine worst-case scenarios and then emotionally live inside them, even when nothing's happening. It's not because danger is everywhere. It's because the mind wants to protect us. But in trying to keep us safe, it teaches us to expect pain, even in moments of calm. That's how anxiety grows. Not from what's happening outside, but from what's been rehearsed inside for so long that the body believes it's real. This is why mental training matters. Just like physical discipline, it requires intention, repetition, awareness. You begin by noticing your patterns, the thoughts that rise when you're tired, the beliefs that show up when you fall short, the story that plays when no one's watching. Then, gently, you name them. You look at them, not to fight, but to understand. You stop treating every thought like truth. You begin editing your inner dialogue instead of obeying it. Because when your mind becomes yours again, when you stop feeding every fear, every doubt, every story you never chose, you create space. And in that space, clarity returns. You stop reacting. You stop chasing. You stop looping through chaos. Your decisions get sharper. Your presence grows deeper. Your focus cuts through the noise. And for the first time in a long time, you begin to live on purpose. Not from momentum, not from panic, but from clarity. That's when life begins to shift. Not because the world changed, but because you got still enough to see it differently. And in that stillness, a deeper truth reveals itself. One that's always been there. You don't need to control the world. You only need to command your mind. When that happens, nothing outside of you can own you again. Master your voice. Master your emotions. Master your finances. Master your mind. And the world stops pulling you off center because you're finally anchored within. That's the shift. Quiet, but unmistakable. When your inner world is steady, the outer world responds with respect. If this message spoke to you, there's another one waiting, right here on your screen. Watch it next. Let it take you deeper. Thank you for being part of Stoic Mindset Mastery, where clarity replaces chaos and silence becomes strength.